Deafening sirens wailed through the deserted streets as Emily raced down the crumbling sidewalk, her heart pounding in her ears. Panicked screams echoed all around, mingling with the guttural moans of the undead. She clutched the pistol in her trembling hands, eyes darting left and right, searching for any sign of safety in the urban nightmare that had consumed her city. Up ahead, a horde of zombies stumbled into view, their pale, rotting faces twisted in a hungry snarl. Without hesitation, Emily opened fire, the thunderous gunshots cutting through the chaos. Rounds tore through the zombies' skulls, sending them crashing to the ground in a gruesome display. But for every one she put down, two more seemed to take its place, shambling ever closer. Cursing under her breath, Emily turned and sprinted down a nearby alley, weaving between overturned cars and piles of debris. The stench of death was overpowering, the air thick with the acrid smoke of smoldering buildings. She could hear the zombies closing in, their ragged breaths echoing off the narrow walls. Suddenly, a hand shot out from the shadows, grabbing her arm. Emily let out a terrified scream, but a voice quickly hushed her. "Shh. It's me, Michael. Come on, we've got to get out of here." Michael, her neighbor from down the street, pulled her into a recessed doorway, his eyes wild with fear. Behind them, the zombie horde stumbled past, their guttural moans fading into the distance. "What the hell is happening?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Michael replied, his brow furrowed in confusion. One minute, everything was fine, and the next, these things were everywhere, attacking people. "We've got to find somewhere safe to hole up until this all blows over." Emily nodded, her mind racing. She had seen the gruesome aftermath of the initial attack, bodies strewn across the pavement, the undead feasting on the helpless. The sheer scale of the devastation was unlike anything she had ever witnessed. "We need to get out of the city," she said, her voice steadier now. "This place is a death trap. We need to find a way out, somewhere we can regroup and figure out what the hell is going on." Michael hesitated, his gaze flickering with uncertainty. "But what about the others? We can't just leave them behind." Emily's expression hardened. "There's nothing we can do for them now. We have to think about our own survival, Michael. If we stay here, we're as good as dead." The sound of shattering glass and more agonized screams cut through the air, reminding them of the peril they faced. Without another word, they set off, weaving through the abandoned streets, their desperate search for escape leading them deeper into the heart of the nightmare. The once bustling city had been reduced to a post-apocalyptic wasteland, a canvas of crumbling buildings, overturned cars, and scattered debris. The air was thick with the stench of death, and the eerie silence was punctuated only by the distant moans of the undead. Emily and Michael crept cautiously through the deserted streets, their senses on high alert. Every shadow, every sudden noise, sent a jolt of fear through their already frayed nerves. The zombie horde had seemingly vanished, but they knew better than to let their guard down. "Where are we going to go?" Michael whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't know," Emily replied, her eyes scanning the horizon. "But we have to keep moving. Staying in one place is too dangerous." They turned a corner and came face to face with a grisly scene. The remains of what appeared to be a family lay strewn across the street, their bodies mangled and partially consumed. Emily felt bile rise in her throat, and she had to fight the urge to vomit. "Oh my God," Michael breathed, his face pale with horror. "We have to get out of here. Now." They quickened their pace, their footsteps echoing eerily in the deserted streets. The sound of their own breathing seemed to magnify, drowning out any other noises that might have alerted them to danger. Suddenly, a loud crash came from a nearby building, followed by a series of agonized screams. Emily and Michael froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. "What was that?" Michael whispered, his eyes wide with fear. "I don't know, but we need to keep moving," Emily replied, her voice trembling. They hurried onward, their footsteps quickening as the sounds of the carnage behind them grew louder. The city had become a living hell, and they knew that their only chance of survival was to keep moving, to find a way out of this nightmare before it consumed them too. As they rounded a corner, a glimmer of hope appeared in the distance. A bus, its engine still running, sitting idle amidst the chaos. Without hesitation, they sprinted towards it, their lungs burning with the effort. "Get in," Emily shouted, yanking open the door and ushering Michael inside. They slammed the door behind them, their hearts racing as they scanned the empty bus for any sign of life. For now, they were safe. But the respite was short-lived as the realization dawned that they were trapped in a city that had been overrun by the undead, with no clear path to escape. Emily and Michael huddled in the bus, their eyes scanning the deserted streets for any sign of movement. The eerie silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional sound of distant screams or the guttural moans of the undead. "We can't stay here," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's only a matter of time before they find us." Michael nodded, his face pale with fear. "But where do we go? Everything out there is a death trap." Emily's gaze hardened, her mind racing. "We need to find a way out of the city. Maybe we can follow the highway, try to reach the outskirts." They peered out the windows, their hearts sinking as they took in the devastation that surrounded them. The once bustling streets were now littered with abandoned vehicles, debris, and the remains of those who had fallen victim to the zombie horde. "Look," Michael said, pointing towards a group of figures in the distance. "There's more of them, coming this way." Emily squinted, her breath catching in her throat as she recognized the shambling, undead forms. "We have to get out of here now." They scrambled towards the front of the bus, Emily sliding into the driver's seat as Michael took the passenger side. With trembling hands, she turned the key in the ignition, the engine roaring to life. "Hold on," she said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. She floored the accelerator, the bus lurching forward with a deafening screech of tires. The zombie horde scattered as the bus barreled through the streets, narrowly avoiding abandoned vehicles and debris. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she navigated the chaos, her eyes darting from one side of the road to the other, searching for a clear path. The bus shuddered and groaned, but it held together, pushing forward with a relentless determination. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught Emily's eye, and she gasped in horror. A massive, hulking figure emerged from the shadows, its skin a mottled, rotting green. Its eyes were black pits, and its mouth hung open in a horrifying primal snarl. "What the hell is that?" Michael cried, his voice trembling. "I don't know, but we need to get away from it, fast," Emily shouted, her foot pressing down harder on the accelerator. The bus surged forward, but the monstrous zombie seemed to be keeping pace, its inhuman speed defying the laws of nature. Emily's mind raced, desperately searching for a way to escape this new, terrifying threat. As the bus hurtled towards the highway, she knew that their only chance of survival was to keep moving, to outrun the horrors that had consumed their city. But with the emergence of this twisted, mutated creature, she couldn't help but wonder what other nightmares lay in store for them. The bus careened down the deserted highway, Emily's knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel, her heart pounding in her chest. In the rearview mirror, she could see the hulking, monstrous figure of the mutated zombie shambling in pursuit, its soulless black eyes fixated on its prey. "We can't keep this up forever," Michael said, his voice laced with panic. "That thing is gaining on us." Emily's mind raced, searching for a way to lose their pursuer. She scanned the horizon, her eyes settling on a sign for an exit up ahead. "We need to get off this highway," she said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her. "Maybe we can lose it in the city streets." Michael nodded, his face pale. "Let's do it." Emily jerked the steering wheel, the bus lurching as it careened off the highway and onto the exit ramp. The monstrous zombie let out a guttural roar, its massive form slamming into the side of the bus as it tried to keep up. The bus shuddered and groaned, but Emily kept her foot on the accelerator, weaving through the abandoned vehicles that littered the streets. The city was a maze of crumbling buildings and debris, and she had to navigate it with the precision of a seasoned driver. Suddenly, a horde of zombies stumbled into view, their rotting bodies blocking the path ahead. Emily's eyes widened in horror, and she yanked the steering wheel to the left, the bus careening down a side street. "We're trapped," Michael cried, his voice laced with despair. Emily's gaze darted left and right, searching for a way out. Up ahead, she saw a narrow alley, its entrance partially blocked by an overturned car. "Hang on," she shouted, pressing the accelerator to the floor. The bus barreled towards the alley, its front end smashing through the debris. Emily clenched her teeth as the bus lurched and shuddered, but it kept moving, the monstrous zombie falling behind as they navigated the twisting, narrow streets. "We did it," Michael breathed, his voice trembling with relief. But as the bus emerged from the alley, a new horror awaited them. The streets were swarming with zombies, their pale, twisted faces turned towards the bus, their mouths agape in a hungry snarl. Emily's heart sank as she realized that they had simply traded one nightmare for another. With the monstrous zombies still in pursuit and the city overrun with the undead, their chances of survival seemed to be dwindling by the second. As the bus plunged deeper into the chaos, Emily couldn't help but wonder if they had made a terrible mistake in leaving the safety of the highway. But with no clear path to escape, they had no choice but to press on, fighting for their lives in the face of a seemingly unstoppable horde of the undead. The bus careened through the streets, its engine straining as Emily pushed it to its limits. Behind them, the monstrous zombie pursued relentlessly, its massive frame crashing through the debris-strewn roads. "We can't keep this up much longer," Michael said, his voice laced with panic. "The bus is starting to overheat." Emily gritted her teeth, her eyes scanning the chaos around them for any sign of salvation. "We have to find a way to lose that thing, or we're as good as dead." As they rounded a corner, a glimmer of hope emerged. A military checkpoint, its barricades still standing amidst the ruins. Emily's heart raced as she gunned the engine, hurtling towards the checkpoint. "Hold on," she shouted, her foot pressed firmly on the accelerator. The bus smashed through the barricade, sending debris flying in all directions. As they passed through the checkpoint, Emily caught a glimpse of soldiers taking up defensive positions, their weapons trained on the approaching horde. "We made it," Michael cried, his voice tinged with relief. But their elation was short-lived as the monstrous zombie came crashing through the checkpoint, its massive form towering over the soldiers. The air was filled with the sound of gunfire as the soldiers opened fire, but their bullets seemed to have little effect on the twisted creature. Emily's eyes widened in horror as the zombie swatted the soldiers aside, its gaze fixed on the bus. "We have to get out of here," she yelled, steering the bus towards a narrow alley. The bus careened through the alley, its sides scraping against the walls as Emily navigated the tight confines. Behind them, the sounds of the soldiers' screams and the roars of the monstrous zombie echoed through the streets. As they emerged from the alley, Emily's heart sank. The city was a sea of shambling, undead forms, their pale, twisted faces turned towards the bus, their mouths agape in a hungry snarl. "We're surrounded," Michael whispered, his face pale with terror. Emily's mind raced, desperate for a way out. But as she scanned the horizon, she realized that there was no escape. The city had been completely overrun by the undead, and the monstrous zombie was closing in, its unstoppable form a testament to the horrors that had consumed their world. With no way out and the horde closing in, Emily knew that their time was running out. As the bus came to a shuddering halt, she turned to Michael, her eyes filled with a steely determination. "We're going to have to fight our way out of this," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that coursed through her. Michael's eyes widened, but he nodded, his jaw set with resolve. "Then let's do it." As the zombies closed in, Emily and Michael prepared for the final battle. their only hope of survival resting on their ability to survive the onslaught of the undead. The bus shuddered to a halt, its engine groaning in protest as Emily and Michael braced themselves for the impending onslaught. The horde of zombies, their pale, twisted faces fixed on their prey, closed in, their guttural moans echoing through the deserted streets. Emily gripped the pistol in her trembling hands, her eyes narrowed with determination. "We can't let them take us without a fight," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael nodded, his own weapon raised, his knuckles white with the intensity of his grip. "I'm with you. We're going down swinging." As the first wave of zombies surged towards the bus, Emily and Michael opened fire, the thunderous cracks of their guns cutting through the eerie silence. Rounds tore through the undead, sending them crashing to the ground in a grotesque display of carnage. But for every zombie they put down, two more took its place, their numbers seemingly endless. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she fought to maintain her focus. Suddenly, a deafening roar shook the ground, and the monstrous zombie emerged from the shadows, its massive form towering over the bus. Emily's eyes widened in horror as the creature charged, its claws outstretched, ready to tear them to shreds. "Look out!" Michael shouted, shoving Emily to the side as the monster's massive fist slammed into the side of the bus, sending it rocking on its hinges. Emily tumbled to the ground, her weapon clattering away. She watched in horror as Michael unleashed a barrage of bullets into the creature's chest, but the wounds seemed to have little effect. The zombie let out an earth-shaking roar and swiped at Michael, sending him flying through the air. "Michael!" Emily cried, scrambling to her feet and dashing towards her fallen friend. As she reached him, she saw the horrific extent of his injuries. His arm was mangled, and blood pooled around him. She knelt by his side, her hands trembling as she tried to stem the bleeding. Emily." Michael gasped, his voice barely audible. "You have to. Get out of here." "No, I'm not leaving you," Emily cried, tears streaming down her face. But as she looked up, she saw the horde of zombies closing in, their gaping maws hungry for fresh flesh. And the monstrous zombie was turning its attention towards her, its black eyes gleaming with malevolence. Emily knew that she couldn't save Michael, not in this hopeless situation. With a heavy heart, she pressed a final, desperate kiss to his forehead, whispering a tearful goodbye. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. Then, with a trembling resolve, she turned and ran, leaving her friend behind to face the horrors that had consumed their city. Emily's legs burned as she sprinted through the deserted streets, the sounds of the zombie horde and the monstrous creature echoing behind her. Tears streamed down her face, her heart aching with the weight of leaving Michael to his fate. But she knew that she couldn't afford to dwell on her grief, not when her own survival hung in the balance. The city had become a living hell, a nightmare from which there seemed to be no escape. As she rounded a corner, she spotted a dilapidated building, its doors hanging open in an eerie invitation. Without hesitation, she darted inside, her eyes frantically searching for a place to hide. The building was in a state of disrepair, debris and rubble littering the floor. Emily's gaze settled on a staircase leading up to the upper levels, and she quickly made her way up, her footsteps echoing in the abandoned structure. Once she reached the top, she ducked into a small room, barricading the door with whatever she could find. Her heart pounded in her chest as she listened for any sign of the approaching horde, her fingers gripping her pistol with a white-knuckled intensity. Seconds ticked by in agonizing silence, and Emily found herself holding her breath, straining to hear any movement beyond the door. But the only sound that reached her ears was the faint, distant wail of sirens, a haunting reminder of the chaos that had engulfed the city. Suddenly, a thunderous crash echoed from below, and Emily's blood ran cold. The monstrous zombie had found its way into the building, its massive form shattering the walls as it ascended the stairs. Emily's mind raced, desperately searching for a way out, but the room offered no escape. She was trapped, a helpless prey in the face of a relentless predator. As the creature's heavy footsteps grew closer, Emily steeled her nerves, her finger tightening on the trigger of her pistol. She knew that she might not survive this encounter, but she refused to go down without a fight. The door burst open, and the monstrous zombie loomed over her, its black eyes gleaming with malice. Emily opened fire, the thunderous cracks of her gun echoing through the room, but the creature seemed unfazed, its massive form bearing down on her. In that moment, Emily realized that her fight for survival had taken on a new, desperate purpose. She would not simply cower and accept her fate. She would fight back, no matter the cost. With a grim determination, she continued to fire, her shots finding their mark, but still the zombie advanced. As the creature's claws reached for her, Emily knew that her time had run out. But in the face of certain death, she refused to give in to despair. Instead, she steeled her resolve, ready to meet her end with a defiance that would shake the very foundations of the nightmare that had consumed her city. Emily braced herself for the end, her finger pressing down on the trigger of her pistol as the monstrous zombie loomed over her, its black eyes glaring with an unfathomable malice. But just as the creature's massive claws were about to descend upon her, a deafening explosion rocked the building, sending debris and shards of glass flying in all directions. In the chaos, Emily watched in stunned disbelief as the zombie was thrown back, its roar of pain echoing through the room. Seizing the opportunity, she quickly reloaded her weapon, her eyes scanning the scene for the source of the attack. Emerging from the smoke and rubble, a group of heavily armed soldiers appeared, their weapons trained on the thrashing creature. Emily's heart raced with a newfound hope as she recognized the insignia on their uniforms. This was a military unit come to reclaim the city from the undead horde. The soldiers unleashed a barrage of firepower, their bullets tearing into the zombie's flesh. The creature howled in agony, its massive form crashing through the walls as it desperately tried to escape the relentless onslaught. "Get to the roof," one of the soldiers yelled, his voice cutting through the din of battle. "We've got an extraction point." Emily didn't need to be told twice. She bolted towards the staircase, her legs pumping as she ascended to the top of the building. Once on the roof, she was greeted by the sight of a helicopter, its blades whirring overhead. As she rushed towards the chopper, the soldier who had given the order extended his hand, pulling her on board with a firm grip. Emily barely had time to catch her breath before the helicopter lifted off, leaving the devastated city behind. Looking down, she watched in awe as the soldiers continued their assault on the monstrous zombie, their firepower finally bringing the creature down. The sight of its lifeless body crumpling to the ground sent a wave of relief and vindication through her. "What the hell was that thing?" she asked the soldier, her voice trembling. "We're not sure," he replied, his expression grim. "But it seems like the zombies have evolved, becoming more powerful and dangerous than we ever could have imagined." Emily shuddered, her thoughts drifting to Michael and all the others she had been forced to leave behind. The price of survival had been high, and she knew that the scars of this ordeal would haunt her for the rest of her life. As the helicopter soared over the ruined city, Emily clenched her fists, her eyes narrowing with a newfound determination. She may have escaped the nightmare, but she knew that the fight was far from over. Somehow, someway, she would find a way to return and avenge those she had lost. This was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a war for the very soul of her city, and she was ready to take the fight to the undead horde, no matter the cost.